All right. Ooh, look, I threw in a little bonus clip. Wow. Get all
Thank you.
fancy.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm here.
So we are sans Chris. He is partying it up in, lower
Gatlinburg.
Appalachia. He's hanging out in Tennessee up in the mountains. So
I can hear the banjos now.
yes. In his case, that might not be the best thing.
Yeah, seriously. Hey, Ron. How are you?
Yeah.
Solid
Yeah.
Peak Surfer. My pleasure to
Yes.
get
No.
to Doc out and friends with him. And
Yeah.
I can't wait. In this day and age, like what with all the crap going on and the current warning about heightened terrorist activities or something like that, this next couple of days, especially in New York State. What better way to figure out how the hell let me hear you squeal, boy. What better way to figure out how you deal with these type of things when they happen, and they happen quickly, right? Then have the guy who is the safety doc on the show.
I said, welcome everybody. You got Mark, Eddie, Solitude, Ron's here, sponsor man. How are you, sir?
The king is in the house too.
Yeah. But before we really get to the show, I want to start off with we had in the Three Beards family, there was a loss, and I really want to reach out, especially publicly, not to put Mark on the spot, but I just want to tell him, we are all really thinking of you right now. Rest in peace, Don Eddie. He lost his father this morning, and so Mark's an important part of the team here. He's really done a lot for us, and I said I really wanted to reach out and just say it's like we're all thinking of you. We're really sorry about the loss here, your father, and we're glad he's in a better place. That he's finally at rest. So
many similarities, Mark, because my dad name is Don as well, and I'm with you.
Yeah. I said if you guys know him personally, it's like I said, just send him a warm thought, like I said, for the family. So all right, we got the, like I said, we'll see if we can bring this thing up, and then Mark, you're welcome. Like I said, it's like you mean a lot to us, so I just wanted to make sure that we did that. So
your family, Mark, whether you like it or not.
Yep,
you stuck with us.
You're our boy, Blue.
You're boy. Bringing me in, and now you're stuck with me, so they're stuck with both of us. And it's not his fault. He has a big wiener. It's not his fault. It's hereditary.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
It's hereditary. It's
I'm
only assuming that the biggest dick is gene that was passed down was obviously had to come from his father. So
I mean, if you're gonna be a dick, you might as well have a good one, right?
Wow, I bet our guest is really going to love that intro right there. So, hey, welcome to the show, Dr. David.
Wow, guys.
Perrodin, how are you, sir?
Awesome.
Let's give him some applause. Switch me with the square.
Holy smokes here. I'm moving all over the screen. So I appreciate it. So first of all, thank you for having me on as a guest. As you know, I've had this date circled on my calendar for a long time, so I appreciate it. And I love your show. I put a note. I wanted to just give a shout out. The interview you did with Katie Turner last month was phenomenal. So,
well, thank you very much.
Just kind of all of your guests. It's a constellation of really fascinating people to listen to. But I thought Katie was just fabulous. So. Thank you for doing that.
And I was really glad that Brian was able to get us connected with her too, because that was one of those. That's the thing. Between Mark, Brian, and some other people, just Max Hawthorne, we've had some people that they've really got us in contact with people. That's really been. I mean, when we started out doing this, I can guarantee you, I don't think this would have been something that would ever have been in my radar, that I'd be getting people like yourself on the show to just, not only do I not have to beg. It's like, yeah, come on. It's like, yes.
Well, this is the first show I've done. When I say done, right? But I mean, the first show I've participated in probably half a year. One of the things after writing the books was, you're doing a lot of promotion with the books, a lot of activities, and then needed some downtime, and I had a heavy course load this year. I teach graduate courses, legal courses in for aspiring school leaders like superintendents, special education directors. So it was a really kind of busy fall. I was preparing, so I just was limiting my appearances, right, and things, but certainly, when the opportunity came up to be on Three Beers podcast, and obviously knowing Brian, having interviewed Brian for the book, and having being a follower of the show, I was like, well, yeah, there's no way I'm going to turn that down. I can't wait to be on the show. So, but so a little bit about me is so I functionally retired in like 2 years ago as a school administrator. When I say that, I've returned in the capacity of a consultant. So I consult mostly in Wisconsin, California. And the areas I consult in, special education, legal issues, school safety is pretty obvious, right? Safety doc, but and that was really more than full time right now. So I teach university classes in person in fall. So the university is about an hour and a half away, Viterbo University. I've been on faculty for 20 years. And then I also teach in spring. I did 2 PBS presentations. So in 2013, I delivered School Security in America and before a live studio audience. And then in 2019, I was invited back to PBS live studio audience to do School Safety in America, Rhetoric versus Reality. And those things air today. Like so I'll, get up in the morning and check my email, and someone will be in North Carolina and say, hey, I was up at 4 a.m. and I saw, School Safety in America, and here's some questions or whatever. So that's been, pretty neat to have those legacy presentations out there. And of course, I wrote, well, of course, but School of Errors came out in 2019, which I call the most honest book about the $3 billion school safety industry. Really punchy, extremely honest. This book has a very strong following in the school safety community. We can't fortify our way to safety. Plus, there's it's a great read. Talk about the rescue of 500,000 people in 9 hours from Lower Manhattan on 9/11. And then in 2022, The Velocity of Information was published, and this is a book really about human psychology during chaos. Kind of an in vivo book. Hey, look at this! Brian Bowden has a copy right there. So, and this
mine's on this.
It's an amazing, right?
I can't show it.
So this was a challenge. This was a personal challenge to write this, and I recognized, as 2020 was unfolding, that it was an opportunity to get in and to write as things were happening. So that was this in vivo chance to write this phenomenal book. 471 endnotes, countless diagrams. It's amazing what is all in this book. Like here, do we remember that places, VR places, virtual reality gaming places in Chicago had to turn themselves into offices just to survive when they were deemed non-essential. So much in this book, 471 endnotes, but 12 interviews. So you get to understand the people. Nikolai Razavayu, the Soviet cyclist who was cycling outside of Kyiv a day after Chernobyl exploded in 86. So he talked about, feeling that metallic taste in his mouth and sneaking away at night with his Selga transistor radio to try to figure out what might be happening, and watching trucks go down the streets and hose down and soap up buildings. And he knew, like, right, you do that for radiation, but no one was saying anything. So just amazing research, amazing people. Brian is in the book. Brian was part of my member check during 2020 to try to figure out, hey, what is really happening? So get people together and figure out what's happening in different parts of the country, and then distill kind of this baseline. So this was a phenomenal book to write, because I don't think anybody else did this in real time. And it grows. Right now, it's in the National Defense Library, Library of Congress, Presidential Library. It's all over the world. It's in the United Arab Emirates. It's in China. Several, copies of this are in libraries in Germany. So I get to see where it's starting to pop up more and more. So it is definitely, if you want to, and I think you should, like, go back and really have this kind of external lens of the year 2020 and what you went through, you'll be surprised, because as I was sharing with Craig, when I present, a lot of people forget that they woke up one morning and they were deemed essential or non-essential. 80% of the people sitting in the audience will tell you that never happened. Imagine that. And right. So, but it dictates everything we do. Like if you're going, where are you going to live? And the whole housing thing, right? I interviewed a realtor in Seattle who was selling high rise, residential stuff. And she said, no one wants to take that on, because what if, what if another pandemic hits and you can only have one person in the elevator at a time, and now you're in the lobby for 3 hours just to get up with your groceries, right? So what kind of degrees you get. So, at the time, to be a dentist during the first few weeks of the pandemic was horrible, because you're shutting down your practice. You have no guidance. You have this massive overhead to keep going. So what does that look like? And so all these things that subtly we have to make these determinations. Are we living in a city? Are we going to live in a country, a red state, a blue state? How are we going to get our information? So, but it's amazing, guys. It is amazing that I can talk about this 3 years later and have the book with 471 endnotes and graphics and screenshots, right, of things. And people be like, whoa, you're right. I'm not denying it, but I totally forgot that. You didn't forget it. You blocked it out.
Well, right? Yeah, it's trauma, so
it's trauma. It's so you realize 50% of the people you're talking to are still traumatized. And how do you get beyond that? It's this finite voltage. I researched also in the book during World War II, Dr. John Apple, soldiers, once they got to 90 days in combat, would either be killed, captured, or have a mental collapse. So, the studies on that and this whole crowd in behavior, we forget, but back in 2020, in March, Amazon was selling shamrocks for your Christmas tree because people didn't take their Christmas trees down. They had them up in July. You put your 4th of July decorations. If you actually go back and look at what was marketed to people, people never took their Christmas tree down. The Catholic Church came out in 2021 and, Epiphanitide, right? You're supposed to take your manger down, 10 days after Christmas or whatever. And they're like, just leave it up. It's okay. Don't, because otherwise bad things happen. Right. But, so we blended. We had a whole year where every holiday kind of just blended into each other. So, you're putting up your, Halloween decorations on a Christmas tree. And, but people forget that. And so the book also, I think, is one of my sentinel works. And honestly, the book is amazing. It's incredibly researched. I worked with a team of graphic artists. We really did a phenomenal job. It's narrated by Ben Hawk. Ben, who is amazing. So you go on to Spotify right now; it's $9.99, or Barnes and Noble. 6 hours and 40 minutes, but the narration is amazing to bring these interviews to life. And so anyway, it just kind of a fun thing is I looked, and this book last week was cited in a research study in the Journal of Volcanology. Yes. Volcanoes, nice. Not Vulcan.
Not live long and prosper.
Wait a second, guys. Not Spock. It wasn't Star Trek, but it was a Journal of Volcanology, and it was a research study about people who were aware, right, that a volcano was looming, but then their decision making on why or they would leave or why they would stay. So, it was fascinating to see that come up on Google Scholar, that the work had been cited there. But for me, it's been an honor.
One thing I wanted to, before we get too far away from it, I wanted to get back. Things that were deemed essential. One of the parts that was the craziest for me is, one, you have to give the officials some leeway in the very beginning, because it was so new. They were scrambling, trying to think how to get ahead of this. So it's like in the initial part, the first couple of weeks, you can't really come get on them too hard for the initial reaction. It was just the stuff when they started doing, like you said, the essential things. How is it that I can go into a Walmart, be in that Walmart with 200 people with my little paper mask, walking around in this thing, touching all the same stuff I hear. That's okay. But the auto parts store just across the street is not essential, and you can't go in there.
Right.
That was the part that it made no sense. That's when people started. I would almost say this. I feel like this is one of those, like you're asking the White House reporter. I got a quick question for you. And 6 minutes later on, after they've given their little monologue, you're like, okay, now respond. No, this is so you have that, but then you have the same thing. It almost made the appearance. You can see why some people really question this. Was it had the appearance that the ones that were connected, the big corporations, were the ones that were given a pass and deemed these essential services, where it seemed like it was a targeting to, we talked about this a little bit off air, where there really seemed to be this targeting of the individual, like making sure that there was that as long as everybody was made isolated to these individual pockets, you would be able to have this control. Because it seemed like when you attack the mom and pop side, that's the point.
Oh, right. And I wrote about Carl Mankey, the barber in Oswego, Michigan, and how Carl was deemed non-essential, and the governor would deploy state police to lock up his shop, right, with a chain and a lock, and then as soon as the media left, they would unlock it. He'd go in and cut air, right? So, it was just amazing to have that essential or non-essential, and then the psychological impact of that. But you're absolutely right. And then again, writing about velocity of information, and I was observing, and with my member check network, including Brian was a member of the network. So let me talk a little bit about that. So I had 5 people. One was in Canada, and the other 4 were in the United States, different parts of the United States. And I would be in contact with them every maybe 2 days, 3 days at the most. And we would just check on some common things, like what is showing up in stores, what is the media conveying to you, have you received essential papers? So for example, Brian would go out and he would take a video clip, 3-5 minutes. Here's what is happening, right? Versus like, here's what the baseline is. It's more active now, or it's not. Or suddenly, like, the leaf blower guys are out, and that's a sign, right? That's a sign, because before, like, if someone was out there with a leaf blower, like, people were trained to like come out and yell at that person. Don't you realize, you're in the middle of a situation. They're out there by themselves with a leaf blower,
fresh air, and he's blowing the leaves.
Right? What are you doing? So by statistically, though, I went in and I researched this, and I pulled out research studies, and it was basically looking at how can you take information and turn it into intelligence? Like, what's the effective way to do that? And for example, one of the studies was, if somebody has a dire medical condition, they tend to focus on their family, like people around them, and they're all kind of giving them information that's going to be like supportive or just echoing the same information. So it doesn't really help them out, right? But once you get into a situation where, for example, 2020, I can talk to Brian in New York, and I can talk to someone in Canada, and someone in Texas, and someone in California. You can figure out, so what is vanishing from store shelves? If you go into a store, are they requiring you to wear a mask? One thing we were looking at was postal delivery. I thought this was fascinating.
Yep.
So I would stand outside and I would watch the postal carrier work their way down to my neighborhood, and they come right up to the house where I live, and they open your mailbox and put the mail in. And I knew a couple neighbors up were quarantined because they told me, we're quarantined because we've tested positive. So I'm like, okay, all right, I guess. But the postal carrier would walk right up to their house, open the box, take the mail, and put the mail in. And then a couple of houses later, they'd be at our house. But there wasn't any PPE. They weren't wearing gloves. They didn't have some type of purple light wand that they were putting over the mail to sanitize things. So I'm like, this is weird, right? Because you would think, as even government imaging, right, that at least your postal workers be wearing a yellow gown or something, like a before surgery, type of appearance to convey to people that there's that there's some attention to transmission between sites. So that was really weird because the postal carriers carried on as usual. And I'm like, how is this a thing? And you mentioned, right, like I couldn't go to our small engines place because they were shut down. They were a non-essential business, but the Lowe's was open. And yet the small engines place is like, we can do one person at a time or two people. Like we have the space, we could do it, but it wasn't even an option, once the governor made that decision in our state. So really amazing stuff that was moving quickly for people, right? And just terrifying. So one of the things when I wrote The Velocity of Information, I had School of Airs was a very successful release. And so I understood the book writing process, and I went back to my publisher at the onset. We were supposed to go to Disney, by the way. We had a flight out of Milwaukee for Disney the week Disney was shut down. So I'm just looking and I'm like, oh, if we get down there, like, how am I going? Like, what if the airline shut down? Like, how am I going to get back? So like, we're doing all these contingency plans. And I'm like, can we make it before everything gets shut down? Because it was kind of a cascading
5 miles
event
from my house.
Oh, so you knew within
Yes.
that 3 to 5 days, everything was just going
to. Oh, it's dead. I mean, it was like a ghost town driving around there.
Oh man, but
you could have gotten right on the rides, Dave. Right on the rides.
Yeah, I would have. If we would have got there a week earlier, it would have been incredible. But yeah, so it was one of those things where I realized as it started to kick off, I'm like, if I start to write about it now, if I go out and I create videos, so. One of the things was my daughter was in elementary school at the time, my youngest daughter, and this really threw her for a loop. So suddenly she can't go to school. She can't be with her friends. She can't go to the playground. She can't have her friends over, all things which were very normal and typical for her. And she can't go shopping with us. Right. So like, my wife and I are taking turns shopping because at that time, like you have no idea what is happening, right? You're just trying to get supplies. Your second pantry is as fulfilled as you can get it. But I sat down and I was thinking, like, this doesn't make any sense to her at all, what is happening. So that was also kind of an impetus of, I'm sure this isn't making sense for a lot of people. And some of the best like stuff I've read, some of the best researchers, they dive right into things like Dr. John Apple in World War II was a military psychiatrist. He went to the front lines. He was in his 20s. Why soldiers were burning out, right? So he's doing that. So I knew right at the onset to start writing the book. So I was writing the book, and then I contacted my publisher from the previous book and said, hey, I'm doing this. And they said, we'll offer you a contract. And so there wasn't a lag time. I was able to do it in real time of what was happening, which was phenomenal. And then the other part was my daughter, we went out and did, I think it was 13 videos. So I sat down with her and I said, what are you hearing? And she's like, my friends are telling me they're digging up the playground. Literally, they're taking away all the playground equipment in town. They're removing it. Mm-hmm. And she had this whole kind of list of things that her friends, were sharing with her. So I said, okay, we're going to go to the playground. We're going to go to Walmart. We're going to go to the hospital. We're going to go to the airport. And we did, like 5 or 6 places, and we did that 13 times. So we would one time a week, we would go and I'd set up the camera on a tripod and she would report it, so she would be out in front of the playground. And what was happening actually was they were bringing in a lot of sand. They're putting a volleyball court in. They weren't removing the playground equipment, but we'd be in front of Walmart and you could see outside they had the footprints, every 3 feet you're supposed to stand. So people are still coming in and out, but trying to make it make sense for her. But then I also had this really rich archive of these 13 videos. So you have provenance of what would happen first and what changed. And also like, I didn't know what was going on. So I wanted to see if the armory, there were more vehicles at the armory. So we did a video across the road and had the armory in the back. So it was one of those things. I think it was great for her because she felt in control, and she also sensed this passage of time, right? We could look at one video to another. She sat down and we do a little bit of editing on it. We shared it out with our immediate family, the grandparents, just kind of like an update on how we were doing. But that was critical for her because she wasn't whirlpooling. And it was also really important for me because I had no idea what was what was happening. And the basketball courts are closed down, right?
I forgot about
and
that, Ron.
they're tying the hoops up so you can't be out. They shut down the state parks. So all these
The
things.
guy just posted here. Do you remember the one-way grids in like the grocery stores?
and
Where
then you're like, and then you're at the end of an aisle and you're like, do I dare go down 3 feet to get a tube of toothpaste, or do I have to like go all the way around and come back?
I did it, and people freaked out the whole time. And then I had, I was coughing, whatever, congestion, smoker's cough, that stuff over your face, and people are just, I'm like,
oh, look how you just set a grenade off. Everybody just goes diving out of the
right.
I literally told people, you're going to have a heart attack before you're going to have any COVID. Relax, breathe. And, you know,
I specifically remember Brian shopping like, the first maybe 48 hours when things started to be like the schools are going to be closed and this and essential travel and all of that was hitting. And I remember this guy in front of me had a shopping cart filled with cases of beer, and he's like in his 20s, and he's like, well, it seems like the end of the world. So, I'm just going to live. Yep. And he was really like, he was thinking, because we're seeing videos coming out of China at the time, right, of people just falling over on the street. So he was thinking, I probably have a week to live, so I'm just going to live it up. This quasi jovial attitude. And that's another thing too, is researching chaos. You see that the first 1 to 2 weeks in a population, like people, as things are, they're kind of novel, they're kind of interesting and fascinating for people. That first week or two, and then it starts to set in. But the initial reaction is really bizarre across the population. It's like, right, if this was also right. Let's not forget the whole context. This is when the government is coming out and saying, "Oh, we're going to have like UFO video coming out," and so it's just it was such a weird year. But
it almost seemed intentional with that right there, where they drop that kind of disclosure during the time when they know less people are actually paying attention to it.
Yeah,
right. I wrote a chapter about it, and then I didn't include it in the book because I had certain limits and things like that. But I did populate out a whole chapter and saying that information would have been such an attention draw. Like you would have just had people tuning in, wanting to figure out, waiting for that. And it was really just a diversion, right? It just turned out to be, at least in my opinion, there was nothing substantial that came out from the government other than kind of like, look over here.
And still hasn't come out from it, but that's another story. Talk about velocity of disinformation. Yeah, they're pretty good at that.
As we're talking about this too, I mean, that was one of the things that was, page number wise, like I said, for the book, it's around 56. I want to say it's like the second or third chapter one. It's the one where you talk about the Admiralty system.
Yeah, with Joe Dolio, right?
Yeah, because I've got that where I can bring it up. I could show that.
Sure. Yeah.
Where the thing here for people, because I've got the PDF part right up there, so it's going to be possibly a little hard. I'll try to zoom in here for people. Right. There, maybe people could see it there. There.
Something interesting too that you were mentioning. I think I mentioned it to you at the time. So my youngest was starting to have panic attacks because of all this.
You're sharing that, Brian. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like she started getting like heartburn and panic attacks and freaking out. And, knowing those 2 years that these kids were really not in school and really weren't learning is going to have a dramatic effect 20 plus years from now.
Well, I mean, think about that, like right there. I mean, I could find the video, and the pictures of the kids that are in band. They're in the classroom with band.
Right.
They've got the paper masks on, but they've cut out holes so that way they can play the instruments.
Right.
And it almost fits perfectly with this chart, where it's like people. It's almost like they're just the common sense, critical thinking part just went out the window. I mean, I've heard the thing. It's like protecting your house from mosquitoes by putting up a chain link fence.
It was like that. I mean, people are doing really strange things. A neighboring school district, so they rented circus tents. So there is a circus museum in the community next to mine. They rented circus tents, and they had their students outside in November under these tents receiving instruction. So they have their coats on and things, but then, everyone's going in and using a shared bathroom and a shared cafeteria. And
I have frostbite, but I don't have COVID.
And guys, get this. So, so I teach the superintendent legal issues class, and one of my students this fall, who's a new school leader, said, "Hey, we just opened up a new high school this fall and all that." So I said, I contacted him and said, "Would you mind going back and telling me if the design of the school has changed because of the events of 2020? Meaning, are there more sinks in the school? More easier ways to disinfect like common touch areas. Your ventilation system in schools, it's supposed to be like a MERV 8. So the higher you get, the more filtration air. So like a MERV 13 level filtration is better. It'd be like hospital grade versus like MERV 8 is house. And so he went and dug into this, and he's like, you know what? Like, the design didn't change at all. Like, we have the same number of sinks. There was no mention of that. There's no increased air filtration. So like, how this informs decisions, right? You would think every school, right, would be built with additional sinks and hand sanitizing stations and these new easier to sanitize high contact surfaces, in ventilation systems. And that never happened. It's not required. So I would sit down and also say face validity, which is a big part of velocity of information. Face validity, does it make sense? Like, Brian, when you're outside, you're watching, people or the postal carrier go from one person to another person to another person and take mail and hand mail back. Does it make sense? And that was part where I'm like, this fails face validity. Like in seeing someone play an instrument, but cut a hole in a mask to play an instrument.
None of it made sense, and there was no rules to the engagement.
Right.
And something that's very interesting is when you were speaking about this new school, my oldest, goes to a brand new school they built, a brand new high school, the first one in Palm Beach County for 25, 30, or whatever it is. I'm actually trying to get them to get you to come in to talk to the Palm Beach School District about all this.
God, I would love it. I'd love to be in Palm Beach. It's cold up here.
It's about 2 hours away from Disney, so I figured, if they pay for you to come in, you get the family.
It's snowing.
There you go.
Guys.
How do you do that? Whoever's doing that, please tell me how you do that.
It's on my Logitech software. I can do a couple crazy things. Look at this.
Can you do a thought bubble? Just out of is there a thought bubble? Chris had that happen, and I think he was touching something. It did.
This doesn't fit really well into the general consulting I do. But
there's another beard. There's actually two other beards, but one doesn't do it anymore. But he had something come up like a thought bubble, and we're like, why can't we do this? Because we would have so much fun. I mean, at one point, I did get a censor button, which is really good. And it's going to come in handy. But having those graphics come up like he's been drinking, leave him, give him a break, would be really great to be putting into these things. But
I don't.
I've been looking for all those things.
It's all part of the software.
I've been looking for a lot of new technology they've been putting into the new high school. The beginning of it. I mean, as far as like changes, the front looks like literally the border gate in Mexico. It's like these steel pillars. And I'm just
really,
I'm looking for coyotes. I'm like, do they coyote you into the class? To my youngest, my oldest. But I've seen some things that look like, okay, now they're going on a little bit of more a sanitary approach. But a lot of the stuff that they're doing now in this school, brand new school, totally top of the line design, they're not going for I don't think they're doing the breathing thing and the sanitary on the handles or special materials, but they definitely are putting in place, if there is a school incident, they can lock the door and people can have a safer room, which is good to start.
Right. So school safety informed that. And, my expectation would have been that the events of 2020 would have informed all school designs following 2020, which apparently, and it's not only that, like I've followed this pretty closely with a number of schools, and schools, right, will prepare more for active shooter or violence. Yet, will you put in additional sinks, or will you increase your filtrate your air filtration system or handlers or zones or whatever. Like there was money out there for this. Schools received billions of dollars for the CARES Act, and it was supposed to be used to increase. And actually, a school district in my conference used their dollars. This is true because they admitted it. They used their dollars to build a new football stadium with artificial turf, and their rationale was we can use it more and get kids outside. And if we didn't use the federal money, there's no way the public would have approved this. So we have a new stadium with outdoor turf, but yet we have a belt-driven, fan that is running through some sketchy, MERV 2 filter. So it'll stop like a baseball, but nothing else. It's just so weird. And guys, I did a budgeting activity, which I've done for 20 years. And I did it this fall in class, and I'm working through with students, and none of it was making sense. And I thought, what is wrong here? Like I've done this for so many years. I know what this stuff is. And what was happening is, this money gets thrown out at districts, use this money to increase your health and safety, whatever. They didn't know where to put it. There was so little guidance. It's called like a block grant. So they were putting it in all kinds of places, and they're never audited on this. So my project, I was just like, this doesn't make, I had to stop it midway and I just said, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Like what you're telling me and the way that things are supposed to be done doesn't match up. And I came back to it the very last class. I did my research, and I finally discovered out that, again, the money was just thrown out there and people were using it in all kinds of ways, and they didn't know how to have good directions to code.
We need that Will Ferrell clip, by the way. I'm taking crazy pills. We need to get
it was. I sat up there, and it's funny because my textbook, I wrote the textbook for the class. I've taught for 20 years. The class is beyond capacity. I'm sitting up there, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do. Like what you're telling me doesn't match any of these projects or these codes, or so in 1 year, did I completely slip and lose my game? And, I went from, being able to hit 300 to,
there was no benchmarks. There was no benchmarks. So people were crazy, right? And there's no benchmarks in their process. And they're just here's $100,000. And people
Brian.
Well, we need wipes. What the hell are you talking about? We don't need $100,000 worth of wipes. I think I brought it up to you at one point. I brought it up to my super during this event, the C event. We had 6 bulbs in our elevator. And I told them, I said, take 3 of them out and put in 3 UV light bulbs.
Sure.
And that will sanitize the elevator.
Right.
And they just, 3 UV light bulbs. It would have cost them maybe $100, and they would have lasted for a while, and it would have been a weird tinge to the light, but the UV light would have killed through the airflow, giving you an extra layer of protection.
Why do that? Why do that when I can spend 3 times as amount and put hand sanitizer stations in each elevator?
Yeah, exactly.
These types of things, right, guys? So this is what this is face validity, which we're doing right here between us and looking over in the chat, right? Things that just obviously don't make sense. And another thing that didn't make sense was Bellevue, Washington, their police department. And I took screenshots, and I made a 45-second video that I posted on not on YouTube, on Twitter. But it was 1 week into the pandemic. They had report your neighbors if they're having a gathering of more than 3 people. You could take a Google map and you could drag the location down, and then you could submit your own pictures that you took and write what was happening and then submit it. So I have all of it, right? And it's cited in the book, although I didn't include pictures, but the video is out there. I have the video that I put together from the site, and then it's still on Twitter. But face validity, right? You're telling your emergency responders, stay at home. We have to separate because if you're testing positive, then half the force will be down. But yet you're saying we're going to prioritize this over vehicle accidents or essential, things like that. If you call and there's somebody grilling in their backyard, and a neighbor comes over for 5 seconds to grab a pork tenderloin or something off the grill, and you snap that photo and there's 4 people in the image, now they're guilty. And whatever happened to that uploaded data, right? Whatever happens to the publicly uploaded stuff? And how fast that came to. It was really slick, that Bellevue, Washington thing. I looked at that. I'm like, this took days, if not hours, if not weeks to develop, and you're putting your resources here. So again, face validity was, why would you do this? There's one reason, and that's to make people feel like they have a job during chaos, like do this like a scrap drive, but it didn't make sense that early to do this. So it was really this weird, report your neighbor, observe. And other people came in from other communities and started to try to capture the people of Bellevue doing something wrong. And they took the website down. This happened by me. Dane County was doing this, Madison, Wisconsin, the capital. And then all these websites went down. I captured a lot of stuff. I wrote about it, but I said, how quickly and velocity of information, right? So how fast information travels, fast in a direction. Information travels to us directly. How long did it take you, Craig and Brian, before you got an email from, the Gap? You shopped there, 4 years ago, you bought a jacket or something. You're like, we're with you. If you need anything, the Gap supports you, right? Or, we got all of these things from companies that had our names of this virtue signaling. Right. And this weird process of how information gets curated to us. And then there's this whole thing called negative vicarious rehearsals. So if something was happening in one spot, it would be magnified by the media to make it feel like it was happening everywhere. Like if you're waiting outside of a line to be at a checkpoint to see if you're checked positive or not nasal swab, right? They would show that, and then everybody would feel like the anxiety from that. And that was a weird thing too, because you're sitting there and saying, okay, so I'm like, so you test positive, but you don't know the results. They mail it to you in 2 days or 3 days, or they'd email you or something. But then in that time, you'd come in contact with other people. And that whole thing was just really, from a face validity standpoint, as a researcher, right? I'm like, well, this doesn't make any sense. If you can't tell people immediately, then
why you having them come out?
The moment they leave and they interact with somebody else, or they stop at the gas station, put their hand on a pump, right now there's a cross contamination, and you can just magnify and you quickly dilute things out from there of how the efficacy of that test would be. so these, and no one was going there, right? Because you can't really swim upstream against the narrative, because it was a really punitive environment too.
Oh yeah. Well, think about it. It's like, supposedly the whole thing we were told is that if I'm in the same room with you, David, if you don't know for sure, there's a chance I'm going to give you're going to catch this from me. So we got to test me. So I'm like, so that's why we got to keep everybody separate. But yet the test, so apparently this, the thought was that this thing is just so easily spread. We're going to easily get this. I mean, the first one I had to go swab for work, dude, I felt like they shoved that thing to the center of my head. That thing went all the way up into my nose. It was like, I swear, I looked at the guy. I'm like, are you doing that on purpose? I mean, I felt like he was swishing it around up there inside my brain. And I'm like, and he's like, well, this is where we got to find, if it's there, it's going to be up inside the nasal cavity. I'm like, if you have to dig that far to find it, it can't really be that easy to spread. I'm like, dude, and then the new test, they just basically wiped it past your nose, and then they could tell you yes or no. And I'm like, yeah, they've changed, but I'm like, does nobody question the fact that this seems really weird that you have to go through all these processes to find it, but yet we have to, like Kat sitting right there, you can't go to these other ones, but the liquor store is wide open.
Right. The liquor store's open, the fast food restaurant's open. But what really got me was, it's like the whole mentality of after the initial like craziness and swabbing, when they came out with whatever to cure it immediately, which I had a problem with. But the logic after that was, well, you need to get shot, you need to get injected, because that's a problem for me.
Michael, you got a cool job.
If you have
your
something,
SpaceX, freaking awesome.
If you're taking a shot, an immunization, okay, and you're immunized from it, then you don't have to worry about me, right? You have immunity to it. So the logic wasn't there too. They got people coming and going and confusing them. It's like, if I don't use, if I'm the only one using an umbrella walking down the street, why does, like, well, no, if you use an umbrella, then we're never all going to get wet. I mean, it's like the logic was craziness. There was
just let everybody know that's listening too. This book isn't just strictly just about the pandemic area. This is just this is one of those where this is such a prevalent thing in the last 3 years where this affected worldwide. This affected everybody's life.
And Craig, thanks for that. Let me do a little bit of expansion on some things in the book too. So the book starts off actually, talking about this concept of cognitive offloading. So, so think about like the digital dark age, right? So if you're saving stuff to a hard drive or saving directions on how to respond in a crisis, or your maps are all saved to a hard drive, the power goes out, you're not going to be able to access that. So this whole cognitive offloading, an example that is great is an AED. So somebody is having a heart attack and another person grabs an AED device, and the AED tells you, put the pads here on the person, and when the tone hits whatever, press this button. So it like leads you through it. You don't have to think about it. Nobody trains on AEDs, but yet most people can use AEDs. So that's a good example of cognitive offloading. What's happened in the last couple of years, and I wrote about this early in the book, is like we go to the web for all of our information. Well, I shouldn't say it, but like 30% of people, if you say like, what's the capital of whatever or how to do it, even if they know it, they're going to go to the web. 30% of the people right off the bat just go to the web. 30% of the people store all their information, every picture they have, everything is digitally stored. So we get into this position where we're putting a lot of stuff out there that's critical. And what if we can't get to it, right? So I also wrote about I got it over on the screen here. In the year 2020, Belarus to Myanmar, there were 29 countries. Their internet services were suspended by their governments, and during kind of protest or strained situations. So they were separated from access to the internet, from communicating, from life-saving news, from files that they had put up. So the thing is, if we get to a point where we have protests and conflict or, anything chaotic going on, like that cloud-based information is likely not going to be there. I run this scenario with my superintendent class where I do a tabletop activity and it's a power outage, right? And it could be a power outage or it could be a ransomware attack, where your system is shut down. So what do? And they're like, well, we would tell people to go and pull up the student rosters. I'm like, you can't do it. System's locked. You can't get to the system. So, okay, how do you get the students' addresses? Like, all these things suddenly, which you're like, whoa,
medical cards.
You have no backup plan for this, right? You have nothing. It's all gone. It's just vanished. So we're really reliant upon the web. And think about too, like pictures. 100 years ago, somebody takes a picture, you print it off, right? You have it developed. So today, we take thousands of pictures, people with their cameras, but CDs don't come with computers anymore, and our JPEG is going to be readable in 100 years. So we're kind of entering this weird digital dark age too, where people are just putting a lot of information into quote unquote the cloud, hoping it will always be there and unchanged. Yet we know like the definitions of words change, like preference changed overnight in the dictionary, and works get edited. So this and for people to just believe they'll be able to access in trying times these resources, I think is way overestimated. I gave an example in the book of like, imagine a fire station, right? So in the community I was raised in 1989, they received a new fire engine, right? And that was like their first big time fire engine. Small towns, they just have these, little kind of old trucks, and they received this fire engine. And at the time in 1989, they received this fire engine. It was primarily for two things: barn fires and chimney fires. So that was the design of this thing. So now they ordered a new engine, and it's going to be delivered later this year. That engine is for car accidents and medical, for like overdoses, right? And electrical fires in vehicles. So it's designed, it has a drone compartment. So like, open it up and you'll have your screen there, and your drone will come up with infrared to see like on a structure where the heat area is. So completely different design. So we also have these systems that change over time. And I think we overestimate how static things are when things are really always in entropy and always changing.
Right.
So, right, if you have that fire engine from 1989, you've never put 1 mile on it, and it's been in there, and you go to use it today, it's not going to, have the light signature it needs to have on a highway. It's not going to be painted correctly. It's not going to have the system it needs for electrical vehicle fires and all of these, and people won't be trained on these things. So it's just amazing stuff. So that's this cognitive offloading. Like I said, there's awesome parts of it, like an AED, but there's also this dangerous part where we've got to be really cognizant of how much we put out there. And I share this with the school administrators because it's been trendy in schools for teachers. It's the administrators, and they sell these systems, right, where you just click on this box of emergency and it'll give you the updates, and you'll be able to quickly access, here's what you do in a bomb threat or a tornado and stuff like that. But what if the power is down? Like, what if you can't get to the system? Or it's not only that, what if the system's hacked? The Colonial Pipeline, right? I wrote about that. A quarter of the country was shut down, and had that lasted, even days longer, you would have had 50% of the fuel pumps run empty in major cities along the East Coast. So cognitive offloading, and so how it's valuable to you, right? As you read this, you start to think, yeah, maybe I should keep a paper map around. Maybe I should have some of these pictures printed off that are keepsakes versus like just, having them on a phone. And things to that nature. So that was one thing. We also talked about member checks is very extensively described in the book. Joe Dolio, who is the author of the Tactical Wisdom series, which is awesome. Brian was a member of my member check, but 5 people. You just need 5 people around.
I think there's one on screen right now that was on the safety check.
Oh yeah,
I think it was a
Bacon Maldito, right in the greater Seattle area. So Bacon was
great stuff. Great sites.
He sent me pictures of roads that were completely shut down because for the safety of the pandemic, I guess. But you'd look at the road, and then the question would be, well, what if there's a fire? You can't deliver down that road, but what if there's a fire at a house a block away? Does the road then become unblocked? Or so he was sending stuff from areas that were not covered by the news. So you're getting this authentic information about like Chaz, right, and stuff like that. And Brian, you're sending stuff from New York, and we're talking about, was it the Mercy or Comfort, the Navy ship, the medical ship, which was deployed.
We had a whole medical ship that was given to New York by Trump.
And then
they didn't use it. They used
it was like,
what's the point?
You would think, right, the whole thing would be like it would be there and it would be utilized, and it wasn't utilized. So then when you're able to provide authentic, hey, like, I'm right here and it's not being utilized, and there's nothing on, the media and how we're not seeing people go there, and suddenly the ship just leaves. That's the kind of thing that really is telling to me. When Chuck Mack sent me a picture of his essential papers, he emailed, or not email, he texted it to me, and he said, here's what I got today at work. And I was pulled over by the police, and I needed to show this and say that I was, head of IT, and I needed to go in. So he's really eerie stuff. So I'm like, okay, is that coming next? Are they going to start checking? Like, I had to do some banking, and I had to drive 2 hours to the bank. And I asked the bank to send me an email saying this was kind of essential stuff. And so I had this like email printed in the seat next to me, because I'm thinking, am I going to get pulled over on the interstate? This is like in April 2020, and I can show them and say, call the banker, because but
go ahead, Brian. Like I said, I didn't want to cut you off right there.
Oh, so right there, member checks and cognitive, and then I want to get into I want to touch on the 3D printing because some amazing things happen, and then also that we touch on the deep fakes and avatar realism, because things are just exploding with that right now.
We'll get to that in 1 second. One of the things that that I was discussing with you, and I think I even told you I had to do. I wanted to go out 2 weeks prior to. I knew it was coming, and I asked my other half, like, I think we should go shopping. Oh no, we can wait. Then she waited, and then we had to go. Like, we lost a week,
right?
And in that week, a lot goes right. So everybody's shelves are clearing off, and you have to sit there, and instead of panicking, you got to go, okay, they took all of this. What do I need to make me healthy and keep me safe? And I started buying vitamins. I started buying multivitamins. Right. I started buying health products. And my other half's like, what the hell are you buying, like half a case of vitamin C for? And I said, if you're fighting a virus, you need to fight it properly with vitamins. And people are taking toilet paper and potato chips and, fried foods. And we were left. And the stupidest thing in the world is you should have been at the vitamin counters first. Grab those and then get your crap.
Yes. So Brian, that is an excellent point. And I wrote about that. And let me echo on that. So it's the chapter Fitness and Fortitude. And it was actually Dr. Fauci himself who was saying, I take a 3-mile run at night with my wife, and the National Institute of Health was saying one of the best things that you can do is to become more physically fit, because then you're less likely to become ill. You're more likely to recover if you're fit. And I mean, all these things, which are axioms, you don't have to argue, right? That if you're more fit, you're more likely to have a positive outcome through a medical event. So I wrote about that. And what I wrote was in World War II, there was something called the Committee for National Morale. And the Committee for National Morale, you saw the campaigns like the victory gardens, dig up your front yard and plant corn and carrots and things like that. That all came out of the Committee for National Morale. Like, everybody do their part. There wasn't anything like that in 2020. Nope. And it would have made sense to have a fitness campaign. So, right.
Close the gyms.
Close the gym. State parks
close
where I was
gyms.
at, the state parks were closed, and they were taking pictures of licenses if anybody tried to go to, a 50-acre state park and hike a trail, right? That was where I was at. So I had Megan Asui on as a guest on my show. And Megan is a fitness trainer in the Seattle area. And I asked her, I said, Megan, what do you think people would have rallied around? Because I wrote and I said, if you would have had something online where people are logging in and they're saying, like, I did so many jumping jacks today. And then it's like, okay, here's your coupon for Amazon, right? Like something like that. Or you could have teams. But she said, like, remember We Are the World, the song We Are the World, Lionel Richie and Michael Jackson, all that. Like, you could have had singers come together and do a song about fitness, right? And that would have been inclusive for elderly and for other, for young people, just people, and see, it, and then have it on TV at a certain time that this would air. But what did we see? So that makes perfect sense. What you're saying, Brian, is like, that's the logic of coming in and having professionals come in and say, here's how to get healthier. But we didn't see that. We saw celebrities and saying, here's how I sanitize my phone. I mix the solution of alcohol together, and then I wipe it gently, and I put it over here to dry. And we don't realize how dirty our phones are. And I'm like, how did we miss out on, how did we not have, right, from the National Institute of Health, and how did we not have this national campaign of fitness? How was that not something that was jump-started in the first 5 or 10 days? And you would ride that for 2 months, right, to get people. Right. It's insane. And you think, like, Amazon, Nike, these companies would have been on board, and the government, if they're throwing some stimulus their way of saying, hey, like, send people a 20% off coupon for socks or whatever it is. If they do, they go on the portal and they report how many jumping jacks they did, or right. I don't know, but if you can be in Bellevue, Washington, and have a very detailed map, you can drag over your neighbor who has 4 people over for the grill out. And you can do that. You could do this. So there was this big hole, which became very apparent. And in retrospect, it's an absolutely excellent chapter. You talk about Roosevelt too, and kind of the fireside chats, like all this stuff
Those are
was
important.
Those are missing.
That stuff's important. Also, just Katie Turner, he complimented you. He was David Perrodin.
Yep.
She's in the chat. She's in right now.
Oh my God, thank you. Yeah, that was awesome.
Rewind to the beginning of the show, Katie, and you're gonna,
rewind it. Your name's mentioned.
Your complexion may change a couple shades.
Yes. One of the things I had to do is, you're looking for things to sterilize stuff. So Lysol was, that was at a premium. So you had to start thinking outside the box. Then you had to wait online, like you bring family members to wait online because they're only giving you one Lysol. So you bring 7 kids with you or whatever. Like, you get over here. I need you to get Lysol. But one of the things I had to do, think outside the boxes. You needed, I think, about 90 to 90% isopropyl alcohol.
Right.
And you couldn't find it. So I literally started ordering it from Horse Supply. I ordered 5 to 10 gallon jugs of it, like a case of it. Don't even ask about the shipping on on alcohol like that. It is insanely expensive, but I'm able to take it and do like an 80-20 mix. And you have, we went from 100% to a decent, like something that's going to help you out down the line. You have to start thinking out of the box. That's what's so great about your book, The Velocity of Information, because if you get the information quickly, that's when you have to start thinking about, okay, what do I need to do to get out of this situation or at least protect myself, right?
I'm just picturing the guy bringing his alcohol to him. He's got a cigar sticking out of his mouth. His shirt's kind of undone. He looks all dirty. He just walks up. Here's your alcohol.
Here it is. No, you're absolutely right. So the velocity of information is and there's a chapter where it's like 12 things you can do to increase resilience and fight finite voltage. So finite voltage is this concept. It's a proven concept through in military settings of 90 days of high stress, and it's also with crab boaters, for example. Like I had Robert Travis in the book, who was an Alaskan crab boater, did 2 seasons on the crab boats, and the whole thing was like 90 days in that environment. You start to lose it. So the psychological fatigue, so it manifests. So how do you, systems will develop? How do you break out of that? Right. So, you keep moving on. So I detail that out in the book. And we talked about some of those things, earlier.
You mentioned the 90-day thing. One of the things I did see, because there wasn't much to do back then. So it's a lot of TV, a lot of streaming, right? So you're catching up. I watched every episode of Moonshiner, started calling my youngest daughter Pickle.
He did.
That's what Chris is. He's hanging out with Tickle right now.
He's like, oh my God, stop calling me Tickle. And like, yeah, girl, whatever. I'm doing my Appalachia, thing here. But it's like the stuff that you had to do was very limiting, and what you were watching, it's I don't know. It was just a bit crazy on taking in, stuff that's going on.
It was, because if you're tuning into the news, up in the corner they had the Johns Hopkins death counter. Remember that?
Yes.
That was an actual thing, right? So so you'd be like, oh, I'm watching
like a really bad telethon.
Yeah, I'm watching a rerun of Frasier here, and up in the corner of the screen is the live time death count. And not to make fun of it, but it was an authentic thing. Again, that people forget unless you have screenshots and you can tell people about this, right? This actually happened. So that was crazy. We also had a really cool thing happen, and that was the 3D printing community. And people forget about this. So the 3D printing community, so I call this a mosaic strength. This was incredible. There were a number of corporations that relaxed their patents and trademarks, and I've got it up on screen here. So there were more than 140 social media groups from 36 countries, more than 18,000 individuals like us. I don't have a 3D printer, but people like us that would be in the 3D printing community, and they would say, hey, we need you to print these masks or these face shields, ventilator parts, or just other parts of things because the supply chain was shut down. We need you to do this bearing, right? And people would get on and they would do this. They would collaborate from these different countries and they would create this. This was an amazing thing to happen. And then and then it ended, right? Because obviously companies aren't going to make money if things are, if they're not charging for things. But you get a glimpse where if there's a problem and you put it out there, it's kind of like the Thingiverse. If you go to the Thingiverse, there's 3D printed, so in my classes, I talk about controllers. Esports is a really big thing for schools. And I talked about how the Thingiverse, there was an issue with a student with mild cerebral palsy, so I had some tremors and stuff. So basically put it out there and said, we need a controller with some dampening and whatever. And people went to town on it and eventually came up with a design very rapidly, this mosaic intelligence to create this design for this student. So this was an amazing thing, a glimpse into what humanity is capable of. But then, of course, the rains come back down and things get shut down, and
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you brought, because that was one of the things, like through reading the book, that I can't, where there's the duality of it, because that's one of those things where, like, the information gets out there, and we'll just use a gratuitous plug, the velocity of the rate of that information returning, like I said, like you said, that information comes back so fast that people are able to create these things or actually solve these problems. But at the same time, like the other reverse, you can see where entities can use this on the propaganda side. They can get this stuff out there and have that negative effect in the same exact rate as the positive. And that's the problem, is now the waters are muddied. And now it requires, like that chart, those lists I was bringing, where it takes that person where you have to go in, you actually have to do your research and discern what is legitimate information, what is bad information, and you go through this process, because it was one of those things, just as fast as it could be good, it could throw you into a death spiral.
Right. Absolutely. And there's something called the conjunction fallacy, which Daniel Kahneman, who's a psychologist and a researcher, so I wrote about it in the book. Shout out to our friend Graham Wilson here from the Super Pilot-ish show. So appreciate Graham. He was also a guest on my show. So thank you for being here. So what was I just talking about? Before I put it as a Graham.
We were talking about that they solved that dampening thing on the mouse.
Oh,
cerebral palsy. Yep.
So we did that. Yes. There was something right before that. I was about to kind of launch into. So let's see our 3D printing.
You started saying, like,
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
How people, you were talking in many ways about how there's a 90-day window when people start to crack or have a failure, and they can just go so far. And I was actually coming in. I remember one more thing. During the C event, when you're sitting there watching stuff, there was a program called a documentary from Camp Respecto. And it was they followed this one company, young group of officers and soldiers in Afghanistan. And they interviewed them every day.
Wow.
And by the time you were finished, there was a light in their eyes when they started. And when they were finished, it was all dark and black. And they were staring straight at you like sharks. And they're like, I can't go back to the real world. What am I going to do? I killed people for an entire 2 years. It was amazing to see that. And it happened quickly.
You're right, Brian. And the thing with finite voltage, once you hit finite voltage, you likely don't recover from that. And kind of don't recover ever. So that was one of the things out of the military research, was to have increased, I guess, kind of like rest and relaxation, taking people off the front. So to cycle them out of the front more frequently, you could extend the days up to 200. But if you take, like we talk about civilians, so, you can talk about maybe people or people you work with. I mean, I have relatives who hit finite voltage during the pandemic, who were terrified to go outside because of what, again, filling up your car with gas and wearing a glove. And did the person before, what kind of, were they coughing? Did they cough on the screen or the credit card reader? I don't know, but
how many people have touched the handle?
There's people I still interact with, and there's even people in my classes, and you can tell they hit finite voltage and they never recovered from it. and that's a frightening kind of realization. It's called crowd-in behavior. These are people who you go to their house, and again, they're surrounding themselves with pillows and house remodeling and a pool in the backyard and things, because that is their perimeter now. They don't want to interact. They don't want to go to Thanksgiving with other people, right? They want to go to the store the last hour it's open or the first hour it's open in the morning. So
and they drive their cars with masks on.
They drive their cars. And so you see this where people just have, and there's no coming back from that. So there is this part too where I brought up in the book and said there are some people you'll interact with, and you have to be very kind of have an empathy, right? Almost a gentleness, because they've been fractured and shattered by what happened, and people maybe you wouldn't even expect that to happen to. So I had a relative who contacted me and said, and this is where I was kind of going, the conjunction fallacy. So velocity of information. So someone comes out and they say, you're deemed essential or non-essential. Okay, so that's one thing. And now they add in something else. Okay, the governor has just shut down the borders to the state. Okay, which didn't happen. But then now there's state patrol. Now they're checking GPS through your phones to see if you're leaving your house. So the more things you add in, it's called conjunction fallacy, the less likely it is for all of these things to be true. But during chaos, like, it kind of flips for people. You can add in like 12 conditions. Like if you walk and you take a longer stride with your left foot, you're more likely to already be infected, right? I mean, these things where the more information you put out there, people, it was normalcy bias. It was self-edification. They anything that would back up what they were being told, they went with it. They never checked. So you had this crazy conjunction fallacy, which Daniel Kahneman talks about. So like, here's a conjunction fallacy. Are you more likely to be? So here's a conjunction fallacy I wrote in the book. A, which is more likely, A or B? The governor has, or you've been deemed essential or non-essential. The governor has deemed you non-essential, essential or non-essential, and all the interstates are closed. Which is more likely? So people typically go with B, the two things. Okay, you're non-essential or essential, and the highways are closed. But we know this is more probable, essential or non-essential, because this adds in this component, like this plus this and this would have to be true. So, and people, and this has been proven in research time and time again. It's not a thing of intellect. I mean, very intellectual people across in a chaos environment, the more information you give them, they kind of they eat it, and it really, it's this thing called vicarious rehearsal. It freaks them out, right? It just terrifies them, and everything. It's like War of the Worlds, which I wrote about. Remember War of the Worlds, when it was Orson Welles was talking, and here they're going through New Jersey. Now, Brian, they're in Florida.
Oh yeah, Bacon brought that up. Yeah, he was asking that thing, like what that would have happened if that,
They interviewed people the next day. So Cantrell was the researcher out of I forget which university. He went out with his team of researchers, basically grad students, the next day, and they were interviewing police, and they were interviewing farmers and whatever. And they'd say, we saw it, and it was right over here, and they would take them to the location, right? And it would never existed. But it was this thing where people will also double down and triple down. So like when I had a relative who was telling me, Dave, the interstates are closed right now. The police are not letting people in from Illinois. And I was like, that's not the information I have. So I would just have to respond of saying, the information I have is different than that. So you need to provide, more information. Can you provide pictures or links and of course they couldn't. And that becomes a very fragile point, because you can press people and say, that's false, like you're lying, or you're just like swept up. And then they have to defend themselves because they feel like they're being challenged. And so there's a point when you just have to say, the information I have isn't aligned with the information you have. So thank you for sharing that. When you have more information, share it out, such as photos, which are time stamped and location and things like that.
Right.
It gives people a way out in kind of chaotic times instead of embarrassing them or forcing them to double down. But we got very vindictive too. We kind of turned on each other and we start to saw each other up. So that was another part of this, which was really nasty. And that's something it's kind of a warning in the book of saying, if things really get stressed and the information comes out and it's incongruent with what you're observing in your member check, just be careful, because like nobody's perfect in real time. How are you during your first pandemic, right? Like you have to have an empathy part of this. So I think there's a big empathy aspect of the book, which is kind of subtle, because I come back at the end of what is essential, like, and are you essential or non-essential, and is that really something externally that someone can tell you versus just a reality that you create and know for yourself. But
there's a class system that came from that. We had it's not just essential and non-essential. It was a subclass, and then the arrogance.
Well, it was a subclass.
Class.
Let me.
We had people. I'll give you an example. I have somebody in law who says, "Well, you got to go get the shot because you have to get it." And then I'm saying, "Well, no, I'm not going to get it." Well, you can't do that. You can't endanger my life. And I'm like, well, what about my rights? I have my own, and their arrogance. And then when you try to not push it in their face, but tell them about certain things, like what's really going on, because you have a lot more information, and they won't believe it because I read the New York Times. I know what's going on. No, you don't.
You're right, Brian. The member check that you are a part of, and just I'll say, like, you being a part of of my member check, and I would assume like I was part of your member check, right? But
yeah,
statistically, those 5 people who are giving you valid observations and time-stamped pictures and location and be able to compare some things is significantly, beyond statistically significant versus the media or someone who just defaults to a media. And
that's where it all started off for the media.
It is so is so dangerous for that. And so it shows the ability. And I had on page 69 of the book, Major League Baseball shut down in-person attendance. And so you'd see the games, and Fox Sports showed a game hosted at Wrigley Field. Cubs were hosting, I don't know, let's say the Brewers. And they showed, and I had this clip and I shared it on YouTube. I cited it in the book, and they show this clip and said, because we can't have fans in the stands, we're just going to digitally put avatar fans in the stands. So they put people in the stands, and then they would say well, now it's 80% Brewer fans, now it's 80% Cub fans, and they're celebrating a home run. So every person had their own unique profile. And this was like a 37-second clip or something. Yeah. But I got done watching that, and I thought, holy smokes, like, had you not said that, and you're just doing, a regular shot of the fans and stuff like that, I would have never known. I would have never picked up on it. So what does that look like for crowds attending a political event, or crowds outside of a supermarket, or crowds out? All of these things can digitally be manipulated very easily at the touch of a button. And we're seeing it. So right now, when I'm teaching these school administrative classes, I have a case study I introduced this fall, and it's based on a true event that happened. In March, in the state of New York, there was a high school principal, and this video surfaced of this high school principal. It was a deep fake video, and the principal was saying racist things, was threatening to bring harm to the school. Right. And the principal saying, I didn't do this. Right. But the video's out there. Eventually it was investigated, and they found students came forward to admit it to creating this video. But the fact that it went that far, the fact that you could create these, if you were angry with a Board of Education member, you could create a video of them saying, to do this is not difficult in this day, right? So to access the software, So the thing is, I had more than 20 students this fall, and I said, what is your policy for investigating deepfakes? What if it's an administrator or a teacher or a student who looks like they're vaping, right? So they can't be on the sports team. And nobody had a policy. There's nothing at the state level. How would you investigate this? How would you look at this video and make a determination if it was authentic or not? And they're like, we don't know. And I said, check with your police. And the police would say, we got a lot of things going on, unless it's a threat of harm to self. And then we would just basically tell you, if you saw this video and it is an administrator saying they're going to harm students at a school, you'd call 911 and that person would be removed from the school by law enforcement, right? Because they're looking at this video. So everyone's like, whoa, we have no policy in place. There's nothing happening at a state level. There's nothing happening at Fed level. We have 421 school districts in Wisconsin. And I said, your Department of Justice needs to be on this. And when I did my 2019 PBS presentation, I spent the last 10 minutes of it talking about deepfakes. And it was little Michaela Sosa. So that she was a deepfake avatar created by, I think it was Calvin Klein for marketing. So they would have her wearing different, Calvin Klein's type of stuff and have her in different venues. And she was completely fake. She had over 1 million Instagram followers. And no one knew that until they came out actually and admitted it. So and if you go to this day, I mean, we're talking 4 years ago, right? I'm presenting, and I said, and Congress had their first hearing in 2019 about deepfake threats. So really behind the ball, right? No one's on top of this. This is going to hit and just destroy schools. What is the authentic record, right? So I didn't do this. I didn't say this. Well, we have a video of you saying this, of making this threat. So, if you don't have a video to counter it, so are you going to have people start wearing their body cams? I mean, Joe Dolio says, and he said that in the book, like, he brings a body cam in a pen, that records video and audio with him. When I had the legal man on my show, he said dash cams are really a must because the police and the courts rely or give such a preference now to video evidence. But you imagine if you're in a contested, it's a divorce, right? And a spouse is producing a deep faked video of you behaving in an angry manner, and that affects custody. So the thing is, this isn't down the road, it's happening. And no one is ready for it, and no one's ready to take it on. So I also say, like, what are your professional organizations doing about this? And I'll look on their websites or look at their conferences, and they do the softball topics, right? So, like, we'll bring someone in to talk about leadership. So, someone talk about it's like, that's great. Like, but how do we study a deep fake? Do we upload it to a portal? Is it with the DOJ? Does this exist? Are you studying this? Is any of this out there? And
do you remember? It was, like I said, politics aside. That's not defending it. I said Mike Pence. He made the thing like, I don't ever go like with somebody of the opposite sex on one-on-one meetings.
Right.
And in a way, people mocked him, like, that's they're doing this stuff. But when in the time of deep fakes like this, I mean, you actually realize that, in a way, as sad as it is, it's almost imperative that you either have somebody else in that one-on-one meetings are something that almost really can't happen anymore, because it's so easy for somebody to come back and say, this happened, I have this. They provide a deep fake because they've used your voice, they've used all this stuff, right? And you don't have anybody else to verify it.
You're absolutely right, Craig. And the risk of that is extremely high, and it's happening. So it's going to be schools, it's going to be corporations, it's going to be medical, it's going to be in the legal system, and we're nowhere near that. So that's where velocity of information is saying, the counter to deep fakes is being able to do your own documentation and having your own record of presentations and events and things really well documented, your record of provenance, what happened first in your stuff. Because what I share with the school administrators too is, I said, the moment you would be investigated for this, right? So let's say this principal in New York what they would do is they would shut down your email, they'd shut down your access to the server. So like everything you would have to kind of prove yourself, you would be separated from.
You. Right.
So that's that whole thing of like putting everything in the cloud too. So, but you're absolutely right. And the even more scary, terrifying part of this is it's not one person who's out to get you now. The swatting stuff with schools last year in my state. And swatting is when 911 gets called and they said there's a shooter at the school.
That's bad stuff.
Half of that was done by an algorithm on the internet that had just been put out there to scan school addresses and then take deep fake voices and call the number and put it in. It's running on its own. So you can't even get
AI
to
comes in.
That's where AI comes in. Country.
And you overwhelm the system that way, because everybody's.
So how do you have integrity? How do you know how the questions ultimately, guys, right, is what is the authentic record? So we get into this really deep question really fast of what is the authentic record of what happened. So, what is the authentic record of what happened today in New York, Niagara Falls? What is the authentic record of, this school board meeting? What is the authentic record of whatever? It becomes a big question, and no one is ready for it. That is something I want to just underline. I just literally completed 2 graduate courses, 20 school leaders in my state, 20 different districts. And they said, if this happened to us tomorrow, we don't know what we would do. And there's no movement on this. So from a career perspective, from a personal perspective, it's a liar's dividend. You can be destroyed quickly. John Ronson. So You've Been Shamed. I mean, John Ronson is an amazing author of the book, So You've Been Shamed. Which was someone who put out a tweet which was misinterpreted and then amplified, and the person eventually or quickly was fired from their job and had to move and kind of just be reclusive. Now that's one thing where that person did something and there was a reaction. Here's something where you could just exist and suddenly there's a video of Brian trying to distill down isopropyl alcohol, and he has a sign next to him, here.
Oh, it ain't a video, it's
cocktails,
real.
Right?
I was going to say, no, that's real. We got it.
Right. So it is. So, I actually had one of the soups said to me, so what do we do? And I said, well, you gotta meet with your legislators. And the other part is like, you've got to protect yourself. Because it's now in the cloud can be out. It can have a video of you presenting at a board meeting that software grabs and changes.
Right. The big problem now between the deep fakes. I mean, there's somebody in this chat right now, and we both saw a video, and it's clear the person's wearing a silicone mask. Okay. They are so good at doing these silicone masks. You would swear it was the person that they made the mask out of. On top of that, they have this new technology where you can take any song and have anybody, any famous people, or even yourself sing it as that person, and you will not know the difference. It sounds like Johnny Cash is singing, Gin and Juice, and and it's just.
You're right, Brian.
They can do it. And we need something in place. I don't trust AI because it's either black or white. The gray area, that middle ground is what makes us human. So they need to either put in a signature or something so it can be detected. You have somebody, Michael Tarr was commented before I could, that there are things, if you know graphics and programs, you can look at the back end of that stuff and you can tell if you want.
So Brian, what I'll say to that is I agree, but right now, again, 421 districts, they have no leadership from the Department of Justice in our state or at a national level. So if you're going to your local police department that employs 2 full-time police officers and 2 part-time, and you're showing them this video, they're going to be like, I don't know, what do we do with this? So what you're saying is right on. The problem is there isn't any effort or at a federal level or at a state level to create this way to verify the digital footprint, right? To come in and to be able to upload. And so what you're going to see fill this gap, then I'm terrified. And I actually did this in my class. So I created this 10 slide PowerPoint, and I came into class and I said, hey, like I'm with whatever corporation, and I'm going to sell you this software that detects deep fakes. And here's what it'll do. It'll tell you 50-50. It might be a deep fake, 50% yes, 50% no, 90% it's authentic, 90% is a deep fake, and that's it. You'll never get 100%. So like, what do? Do you hire me because your state's not doing anything? Here's what the cost is. It's like every time you do it is $200. You can subscribe for $2,000 a year. You don't know, you upload it to me. How am I protecting the data, right? And what's your Board of Education policy to match this? Are you suspending a student while you're investigating for deep fakes, even though students like, I didn't do this, right? It's not me. So now they're suspended from school while the software isn't. So these things, there is a response to this, but no one is going there. And again, we have 421 districts here. One is on an island that has 40 students. So they don't, the superintendent shovels the snow, and also they have 4 microwaves to heat up lunches for kids. So this is crazy that there's no defense to this. And if you're the recipient of this, if you're a teacher, a Board of Education member, a parent, or whatever, this it can destroy your career. It can separate you from employment. It can ostracize you from your environment, from your family. It is devastating. And to me, I look at this and say, how long do we have to sit there and say this is a problem before there's some movement? It even is a federal thing. We have a federal election. We have a presidential election coming up in less than a year. And, think of ads that could be put out there that are deep faked, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now, you're not supposed to do that in California, right? It's illegal. But by the time you would actually have someone assess it, and who's going to assess it? Which company is going to get a contract, Oracle or Intel or whatever? I mean, so I think there's this huge event is happening extremely at a rapid pace. And if you're caught in it, the shrapnel of it can destroy you. And there can be almost no coming back from this. Like that superintendent in New York, right. If you research that, like he was saying, I'm sitting down with my family and I'm thinking my career's done. I'll never get a job anywhere again. And then, finally the students confess and stuff, but you will have people where this will be the end. And you will actually have people who I believe, where they'll be contemplating, harm to self, suicidal thoughts because of this, or
depending, right? You put somebody in an image with, a minor in the image with another person who's didn't do it to frame them for whatever. And then that minor's parent sees it, doesn't comprehend that it could be a deep fake. And the next thing you know, you're dead. And, the
dad's in prison.
Yeah. Dad's in prison.
No, you're absolutely right. And not to go and kind of, to spin this to an exaggerated point, this is where we're at. There are additional case studies I brought out in class that are authentic, right? That are happening right now to students and this is just in a school setting, but it would make sense that, right, this is going to replicate across all environments. So to be aware of it, to figure out how to counter the technology, and to have your own personal record as possible of to document what is what is happening. And actually, it's interesting you mentioned. I knew someone who was an engineer, and as we were talking about this, the engineer said, there are times when I have to go out with somebody else, and we are dispatched to a site 3 hours away, and whether that person is, male or female, now I am going to have a camera inside of the car or a microphone, and I'm going to just have it running because I don't know who this person is assigned to go up with me. You two people are going up to address this system at whatever this location. What if they say, I was saying things that made them uncomfortable, and so you would have. So we are we are in this really bizarre world. And again, the whole deepfake thing of what you're seeing, is it authentic, right? So, I saw some of the latest fireworks videos from the 4th of July where they were having fireworks or drones to make it look like there was a helicopter in the sky, like a military helicopter. And if you flash it, it just the right amount of time, the right amount of sound effects to go with it, it looks real. Or at least like if you're from a distance but there you're expecting a fireworks show. But what if you weren't, right? So, but it's all of these things. And I mean, Brian was so essential for me because, New York was an epicenter. I mean, everything you heard on the news was just horrible. Everything happening in New York, you couldn't step outside and all of that. And Brian was bringing some balance to that. And then, my other member check networks, but any of us
that was important. All those guys were important. Yeah. Everybody.
It's critical. And I would say, and part of what makes that work, and I wrote about in the book, is you have to all be from the different areas. So if I got like 5 people in my town, that doesn't help me because we get the same information.
I'll fight you on that, bacon. Pineapple does go on pizza.
No, it doesn't. And bacon, you're right about
especially that. A Hawaiian with bacon. Come on, bacon in your name. Yeah, Canadian bacon and pineapple pizza is damn delicious.
You guys remember, truck drivers? So I live on and the interstate runs right past our town. So it literally takes me 3 minutes to get onto the interstate. So in all states except Arizona, the waysides were closed down during the pandemic. So who's essential, right? Truck drivers are essential. Drive 80 hours and double your load, and it doesn't matter. And I interviewed, I had a truck driver on the show, and we were talking about this, and we treated truck drivers horribly during the pandemic. We had parades for our healthcare workers where we brought out $1 million fire engine and led them to work, right? But our truck drivers, we didn't have they couldn't do laundry, right? So we didn't have any place for them to do laundry. They couldn't grab a hot meal. They couldn't. So Arizona kept 2 waysides open, and they were like abandoned waysides that they hadn't used, so they like opened those up and let truckers go there. But what we should have done, right, is we should have had a national campaign rallying, and you have brown bags and you're putting a can of soup in there. You're having an audio book like that's free for truck drivers. They have they can download like 5 audio books a week as there. So I was talking with and all these things, maybe it's a blanket, maybe it's a note from a, kid at a school. Hey, thanks for doing what you're doing. And you stop and you get there at the wayside and it's open for the truck drivers. They can go in and they can grab a shower and they can get their laundry done and stuff like that.
Right.
We didn't do any of that. And like, no one thought about that. And all these like fairgrounds where you could have had people come in and truck drivers like stay overnight. We treated people like, actually, like you're talking, the second tier, Brian. Oh my God. We're truck drivers, the second tier. I feel so bad about that.
All those essential workers got screwed in the end too.
They did, because they got a bad hand.
They're going 2 years, 24 months plus dealing with these people, no vaccination, no nothing. And then all of a sudden they come up with some magic crappy potion. And if you don't take it, you're fired. Well, what happens to me being essential? No, you have to take it. And that's a whole nother, I'm waiting for that book to come out from you. But
yeah. Well, then you'll have a podcast of whatever happened to Doc.
Yeah.
The day Doc vanished.
Doc safety.
What happened to the safety doc? One minute he's there.
It'll be this documentary. It'll be like Unsolved Mysteries, like what happened. But
what we're gonna do right now is we're gonna talk about it. He just got disappeared. He got taken to a black site. The helicopters came and they got him.
Maybe he needs the Vacation Doc podcast.
I didn't, and so I mean that was something I didn't write about in of the truck drivers because I learned about it kind of later. I knew in the moment, but so where I live, for example, again an interstate, and we have the county fairgrounds are located very adjacent. So you could have had truck drivers getting off, picking up their kind of care package from the community, or even picking up the hand sanitizers, wipes, personal things and stuff like that. And so this whole face validity thing kind of comes back to when things get really chaotic, you're really you have to have your locus of control is yourself, and then it's your family, and then it's like trying to go out and do other things, because information is going to be just wild. They're going to shoot stuff all over the place. Eventually it's going to be targeted towards you, and the information that's going to be accurate is what use so face validity is a thermometer. If I have a thermometer, I'm outside and it's snowing and I'm shivering and the thermometer says it's 87 degrees, I'm looking at the thermometer saying, the thermometer is broken, or I'm delusional. I'm delusional.
Right.
And then that's where a member check needs to come in and say, no, Dave, it actually is. It is warm outside and you are having like heat stroke reaction or something like that. Yep. So that's where the member check comes in and says, what's happening to you is an outlier, or maybe something weird is going on personally with you, and you're having almost a breakdown reaction to this, or a burnout reaction. And
age 60 to 62, folks, that's where
oh my God, it is. I go back into the book and there was so the book was condensed. I worked and I got it down to be really salient. And again, working with a team of editors, and I go back and I'm just amazed when I read the book, because or I listen to it. I love listening to the book, and I'm like I am amazed at just the things and how the book is almost future telling, right? Like there's so much in there that is just happening right now, and we'll repeat, but and I think it's assuring if you read the book. And one thing, for example, like when I wrote School of Errors, I had school board members who would contact me from all over the world, and they'd say, I thought I was crazy because I would go against my school for wanting to buy, bollards, $1 million worth of bollards to put around an elementary school, because, we have other ways that we can spend money to aid communications. And I was the only one until I had your book. Right. And I think the same thing is happening with velocity of information. Is people read it and suddenly they're like, oh my God, first, I did experience that trauma. And second, like there's a whole historical perspective of what things look like, going all the way back, to World War I, World War II, and also how we approach things as adversity as a population. There was this thing called the Wehrmann im Eisen. It was these wooden statues, which would be like, 8 foot tall, in Vienna in Germany in World War I, and you'd go and you'd pay and you'd get a nail and you put the nail in the statue. So if you go Wehrmann and Eisen, the Iron Man, there's still these things in existence today. Like you see these statues, which are all made out of nails. So people they felt like they were contributing, right, fiscally, and then they'd be out there and people would be seeing them. We had nothing like that. So this whole thing today is, people are experiencing chaos and trauma in a deep fake environment, all individually. So that's where the book is trying to say, like, the government's not going to help you. And really it's like you get friends, get 5 smart people that you can talk to and trust, and who are your member checks. Henry Ford, Burroughs, Edison, they did this back 1910 or whatever, they called the vagabonds, and they would get together for weeks at a time just because they had similar interests. As where do you see things going? What is happening? What's authentic? So it's not this new concept, but I'm urging though people to find these connections and to do that, because what it'll do is it'll level you out. And also be really aware with your kids there it is. I had a picture sent to me by Dr. Phil Heinrich, who teaches at a university in Germany. He was able to get a picture similar to that. So that's a Wehrmann im Eisen. They also did like battleships where you'd go in. That's all wood, and that's nails, individual nails that are put into that. So that was one of these civilian morale things. So again, something we didn't have in 2020 was a civilian morale activity, but this was unifying. So there were, as I said, there was this big gap. And I think the thing that's scary is there's going to be this big gap if we get, deep fakes, or if our financial system, gets ransomwared or whatever. I mean, and so that's where, again, 5 people, statistically proven, 5 people. And you just say, Brian, when you went out shopping today, or when you went to the bank was there a sign up and it said, "Hey, we'll buy your quarters from you." Like I have a sign in the book, like with a gas station, you're able to give you like $2 for like $1 where the quarters is really weird. But and suddenly you're like, okay, that's happening there, but not happening here, or like it's happening everywhere. So maybe I need to get more cash on hand, or maybe I need to go to the store and get more, potatoes and canned goods. And but just especially for my kids, my youngest daughter, taking kids out in vivo and saying, what do you observe and what's different from the last time? And then staying in contact with people. And again, you will have people who will just drop off. They will hit finite voltage, and it's so dangerous, guys. It is. We've probably lost countless people to suicide from the trauma of 2020, which will never authentically be reported. But it is just terrifying to see, and then. And if you see people kind of going through this, like I spent time with my neighbors who were elderly and housebound, and I would just be on the road and we would just have a conversation, right? So they had their distance of 20 feet from me, and I made sure to get out there and to do things so they felt like they were connected. But this book is there will be numerous times you'll come back to points in this book or stories, and you'll be like, oh, Robert Travis, the crab boater, who talked about entropy of systems, like how the boat would ice over, and until if you didn't realize the boat was starting to accumulate ice, it would be too late and it would sink, which like a boat 2 years ago sank in the crab harvest because it just iced up gradually and no one was really attending to it. And to have Juan Brown, who I interviewed about the Oroville Dam. The Oroville Dam is the tallest dam in the United States. It's in Northern California, and the spillway deteriorated on it in 2020. So, Juan is a pilot with American Airlines, and he actually had a private plane, and he went up there and he's like, holy smokes, like if this thing gives way, like Sacramento will be under 5 feet of water. And people were tuning into his channel. And when they would hold Department of Water for California would hold their meetings, Juan would show up and people would be like, I want to talk to Juan. I want to ask Juan what he saw when he flew up there. And it was interesting because Juan was seen as a truth broker, and he was actually embraced by the Department of Public Works. They gave him an award for truth or an accuracy in civilian journalism. And actually, if you didn't have a Juan Brown in that situation,
that's what it was.
I think you would have it would have been much, much worse. But you had the civilian truth broker. So again, that's something like anybody can do. Like you can report on kind of what's happening around you. But so I'm really excited. I go back in that 3D, that moment, like the 3D stuff was lifted and it was like everybody worked together, and you might have somebody from Istanbul who's like, hey, like I'm going to redo this design and here's a bearing for like a motor because you can't get the part right now in this hospital or like for this truck or whatever. And then someone else prints it, in Kentucky, and then it's there and it works. It's like
there are a couple of good moments. There's a couple of a lot of bad moments, but I mean, there's so much information. I think we're running out of velocity tonight. I don't know. We're close to that time, and hopefully you don't have to work tomorrow, anybody. But where can any
get dinner ready for tomorrow?
I got lucky because I got an autographed copy of the book, but. Do you have where can somebody pick up your book, and if they wanted the autographed copy of your book, which
holy smokes, so it is rare outside of author events, but if you do want an autographed copy, like go to the website and you can find my contact information. Usually then we have some kind of arrangement, right, where figure out what the cost of the book is to send it to you, and then I'll sign it. So glad to do that. I've sent books all over the world, actually. So it's amazing. Like people will pay like $100 to have a book sent. And I'm like, the book is like, $30, but okay, if you're willing to pay the shipping. So, but really, so first of all, the book is available any place you find books. It's through Rowman and Littlefield, so it does have an international presence now. They set the price of the books, so obviously a hard copy is going to be pretty expensive, so you want to get I would suggest the ebook version, because like all the graphics are in there, and it's cognitive offloading, right? Download it to your own device, or the paperback. Again, I think the audiobook is phenomenal with Ben Hawk. It's only $9.99 right now.
I think I'm actually going to pick that up.
You get the whole
I posted
PDF.
that. Yeah, I posted that information on the
guys. It's through the end of the month, through November 30th. You get the entire PDF, which is maybe like 50 pages, because I put all the diagrams. I put the PDF together myself, the companion, which is, you get that as part of the $9.99. Ben Hawk is absolutely amazing as a narrator. So you're listening to this and you're hearing these stories of like, I mentioned it briefly, but Nikolai Razavayu, the Soviet cyclist who had to cycle in Kyiv the day after Chernobyl, right? And he's going past lead covered buses as they're evacuating people, and they're not telling him. And then the Western countries are all getting out of there, and this is crazy stuff. So you get to know these people. So you'll go through there. Larry Lawton, America's biggest jewel thief, is in the book. I interviewed Larry.
That was a great episode he did.
Oh my God. Larry's got 2 million YouTube followers, like literally, right? So
wow,
it's great.
So Larry talked about, what are the things, and one of the crazy things was, he said, when you got out of prison, they gave you like $5 bills, and the president's face was really big on it, right? So you thought it was fake money, like they were trying to trip you up. So he went to a Subway, which was part of a gas station, which was a totally new experience, because when he went to jail, like those restaurants were always separate from gas stations,
right? So
he's like, the moment I put this money up there, they're going to tag me. They're going to say, back to jail for you, because this money he hadn't seen. But so velocity of information, how fast things change. So it's an amazing book. There's nothing out there. If you're a fan of, like, I would say Malcolm Gladwell, John Ronson, kind of how people analyze contemporary things, this book is your jam. And whatever political leaning you have, the book is still going to be your jam. And also I think it's just, it will be a point you're going to read this book, and you're going to feel that the trauma will hit you, and you'll also have the tools to deal with it through the book. Like, I think a lot of postponed trauma, that's probably the number one thing people react when they have the book today is they say, oh my God, like I finally dealt with something like I put off for 3 years. So it's pretty amazing. I'm just glad I had the gift to write it, and the Amy DiStefano was my graphic artist, and my publisher stuck with it, because it got to be a pretty touchy subject at the end. Do we bring this to publication or not?
Right.
So
yeah, we definitely have to do this down the road too, because I said we could easily do a part 2.
Yeah, we could definitely do a part 2. I don't know what your schedule is, but we'll figure that one out.
It's one of those things, like if the subscriber numbers ever got up there, it's like, I know I could do this full time and easily do like those 3-hour shows. I mean, it's like, I don't have a problem doing it. Yeah. Man, David, man, really appreciate you coming on the show. This is fantastic.
Thank you.
Have a good Turkey Day tomorrow too, by the way.
Yeah, wishing everybody a terrific Thanksgiving, and and again, thanks for having me on the show. I am kind of protective of my time and resources, but getting the invitation was an immediate. I wanted to be on the show. It's an honor to be here, Brian. I appreciate you as a friend, kind of as the easement of bringing me into the show, Craig. So I really, and I love the channel.
Humbling.
So if you're listening and you're kind of new and you're following like my stuff, like please subscribe, because I love the shows.
Yeah, no,
I appreciate it.
It's really humbling. I really appreciate you saying that, because I said it's one of those.
I
won't lie. I suffer from imposter syndrome. I feel like I'm faking it till I make it type thing. So it's one of those, when people say they love it, I'm just like, wow. It's like fanboy. It's like, they love me. They really love me.
They love me. But I'm serious. I'm not kidding. I'm talking to a couple of people down here, and they're talking about school security. I said, and I said, you got to get Dr. David Perrodin in here. And they're like, who? And I'm like, I'll show you. And I'm trying to get you down to Palm Beach and to give a lecture to, how to prepare schools, because there's such an explosion in growth. They're looking to build more schools, and there are things they're missing. And it's important to have somebody in here to give them the direction, or, buy a whole bunch of your books and give you a free Disney vacation.
Right. A free pass to the mouse, would be good. But yeah, no,
I'll give you a tour guide.
Going back, this book is phenomenal. And has even my publisher said the sales on School of Airs was beyond anything they anticipated. I narrated that in studio, by the way, like School of Airs, I did the narration for, so you can hear the growly, angry, old, wise safety person who's counter industry, like speaking to you in the book. And some people think that, that's actually a pretty entertaining aspect because, the emotions are very raw in that, but I appreciate, so the PBS presentations are free. So if you type in my name and plus PBS, those were, again, before a live studio audience. Hundreds of thousands of people have seen those episodes. They continue to syndicate weekly throughout the country, especially after a Sentinel school safety event. Like, they'll be immediately put into programming. So, it's easy to get a hold of me. My contact information is like at the front of every video, and plus like the other stuff. It's not, if you actually, and there'll be people who say like, I'm a safety person in whatever. And there's a couple of people in Florida, Brian, actually, who contacted me. One is a county, oversees a county for safety, and a couple school folks down in Florida who contacted me and wanted to do some follow-up. And I'm very giving of the resources, right? Because I want people to be better in systems. What you see is very authentic, from me, which is, part of being a member check. You're going to be accurate. You're going to be an authentic person. So
that's
awesome.
always
good.
Yeah,
go to safetyphd.com. That's the website right there. So
yeah, and we're going to give you applause.
Yes,
David Perrodin. Thank you.
I love my sound. You can realize you understand microphones when you.
I am putting myself on the Jumbotron here.
See, look at that. See, that is awesome.
In Florida.
There you go.
The Tampa Bay Arena. Sell out. 14,000 people right here.
It's kind of hard because I'm, actually Tampa Bay is like New York Rangers.
Those are awesome.
I'm outside in Boston.
We need this. Hey. What a Sox to play in hardball. Okay.
I'm on the front news here in Windsor, Ontario.
That's good stuff. If you can actually change that to and put your book on there and say, put it on your book, but whatever. We'll work on that later.
Yeah,
we'll have to. Wishing everybody in the chat, whether you are
those are not American, awesome. I like those.
A Thanksgiving of happiness.
Yep. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Like I said, make sure you go buy the book, especially the audio book, because it's on special right now. I said there's links in the description of the episode as well. I've got that put up there on how to get that information. Go to the site. Buy these books wherever fine books are sold.
Yes. Take us away, Craigie.
All right. So everybody, have a great night. Thank you again to our sponsor, Burt Radio. Like, subscribe. Help, like I said, appreciate everybody. Solitude just bought the audio book. So there you go.
There you go.
So there's one. I know for one for sure.
There's another one.
Possibly two with Brian there. So there.
No, I'm definitely going to
thumbs up. But everybody, like I said, check us out. Like I said, you've already seen us here on Facebook, YouTube, but just like, subscribe, follow us for. We got Paul Eisen coming up next week. We'll be talking with him, and then just everybody, like I said, please go for more information. Go to safetyphd.com and reach out to him there. And just Dr. David P. Perrodin, thank you, PhD. Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it. Like I said, it's awesome. We definitely have to do this again when your schedule is free.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Be my pleasure. So it's been an honor, and I've really enjoyed myself tonight, guys. So thank you.
That's what I always strive for. I want it to be something unique and different than what you normally experience. So that's good. Today was pretty good. I kept my ADHD in check. I wasn't all over the place. So I thought I did not too shabby today. So, all right, everybody, have a great night. Let's see. I'm going to give you do you want to see the name promo, or do you want to see the cows being abducted? Which one would you like to see out?
Holy smokes, guys. It has to be cows being abducted.
All right. Here we go. All right, so everybody, thanks for watching. Have a great night, and we will see you on the next one. Good night.